5 spiritual awakening traps that sabotage growth. Number 1, trying to wake other people up. I know when you start to go through a spiritual awakening, it's like by far the most exciting, exhilarating, mind-expanding, rewarding, amazing thing you even thought was possible for a human being to experience. It's changing your life. It's expanding the way you perceive reality. It's creating a richer experience, more love, more bliss, more healing. Why would you not? It's your obligation to share it with other people, isn't it? Especially the ones you love the most, like your mom and your dad and your sister and your brother and your close friends and your coworkers. It's your mission. That's what a lot of us tend to think. And it's coming from a pretty genuine place. You stumbled upon something grand. Why not share it? Well, as you may have already discovered, why not share it? Because it doesn't always go over in the way we think. I know a good example that always comes to mind is my daughter. She's 13 years old. And I know if I want her to do something that I know will benefit her, I have a better chance of telling her to do the exact opposite. Because she doesn't like being told what to do. She prefers to think for herself. She prefers to navigate her own life. Even though I can see there are things that would help her, it just doesn't really work. And you could say she's a stubborn teenager, but most of us are still like that. Most of us have this kind of internal awareness that we are sovereign beings. We are free spirits, as they say. And we're gonna do our thing. And a lot of times good advice at the wrong time, when it wasn't really asked for, is experienced with resistance. Now, more importantly, one of the things I've realized is that a spiritual awakening is a very big deal. It's a very serious thing for a person to go through mentally, emotionally, obviously, and especially even physically. A lot of you've watched my videos, you've been going through this, there are literal, what people call like ascension symptoms, physical symptoms that come because your body, your nervous system all of a sudden is being beamed up with a higher frequency energy. And it's such a change, such a biological upgrade that it can result in fatigue and insomnia and exhaustion and rashes and all sorts of weird symptoms. And that's you. That's someone who's ready. That's someone who's where it's appropriate for them. A lot of people are just not ready physically. That amount of spiritual energy to flow through their body that's not at all equipped for it, not at all prepared for it, has far too many blockages, can be disastrous. In fact, I've read a lot about Friedrich Nietzsche and people like that, and also Sid Barrett, people that have kind of gone a little crazy. And there's a fine line between having a mystical experience, a mystical outlook on life, and absolute madness. And sometimes the line is quite blurry. But the point is, a spiritual awakening too soon for someone who's not ready, as you could probably imagine, it could really test your limits quite a bit. And that's, again, someone who's sort of ready for it. But for people who aren't ready for it, people too stooped in fear, people whose bodies are not ready, people who are just not ready to face their traumas in the way you have courageously been willing to do, that amount of stimulus, that amount of energy, that type of experience, it can be overkill for them. Just like anything in life, if I was to put my 6-year-old kid into high school, even though it's you got to learn high school, you're going to learn a bunch of stuff, it's positive. It's too much. They're going to shut down and feel dumb. It's going to have a bad effect on them. I read a book a little while ago called The Autobiography of Gopi Krishna. Gopi Krishna had pretty much the most well-documented and maybe one of the more, I would say, the most well-documented, intense case of a Kundalini awakening. And he wrote about it in his awesome book. It's fantastic. He eventually made it onto the other side and became somewhat enlightened, you could say. But it took him many, many decades of absolute, it's hard to even put into words, but misery, health complications. He was literally on the verge of death, on his deathbed multiple times, because the force of that Kundalini energy was just too much for his body. And that's a very spiritual guy to begin with. He was meditating. He pretty much did everything correctly, but it was just maybe too much karma. I don't know, I'm speculating. But the point is, even that dude, he was brought to the brink of death multiple times because his body could just barely hold on with the frequency blasting through his body. So as much as our intentions are pure, I think having a proper and full understanding of what we're intending for people as we try to sort of nudge them in the right direction, it can be kind of helpful to just be aware of the situation, that maybe it's just not their time. Maybe they're gonna go through it maybe 5 years from now. Maybe they have to kind of have a couple of things they go through before they're actually ready. And as an intuitive being, as one going through a spiritual awakening, if we bother to take the time to understand and be mindful of where other people are at, it's pretty easy to tell. If you're kind of tapped into yourself and sort of unattached of what other people are doing, even your loved ones, which I know it can be hard, and just kind of trust, you can choose to trust that they're on their own path. They have their own team of spirit guides watching over them. They have their own karmic trajectory, etc. And it's not my business to meddle in too much. I can trust that they're good. They're an eternal soul. Their soul knew what it was doing. It didn't make a mistake that you need to come and correct. They're good. And if you can detach and trust and just stay in your own frame, then when there is an opportunity to share something, usually when they decide to ask you, you'll recognize the moment when it's there. And lastly, it's a way to spare yourself of sometimes the odd or unexpected reactions of people when you do try to tell them. I didn't do it, by the way, I didn't do any of this correctly. I tried to wake everybody up. A, it didn't work, and B, I got weird reactions. I got people thinking I was nuts. And looking back, I can't even blame them. I'll give an example and then we'll move on to the next trap. I used to be a personal trainer, and at one point in my life, I was working out with clients in my basement gym that I created. And I trained my mom and her friend. They would come once a week, I would train them, and it was awesome. And one week, my mom's friend decided not to come for whatever reason, and I saw it as a golden opportunity to enlighten my mom about the shadow government. The shadow government that was heavily influenced by negative reptilian beings that are trying to create this fear trap across the planet. And I just sort of vomited in the mouth, spilled it all, thinking that she needs to know this. She needs to be aware. And it's crickets, silence. I could tell she was like, how do I respond to this? Should I get help for my son, who's obviously off his rocker? That was kind of the vibe. And it took me a couple of years of reestablishing my credibility with my poor mom. She didn't even take in any of that information. It was not relevant for her on her path at that time, and still isn't relevant for her either. But anyway, I in trying to do something good, in my naive sort of state, I ended up worrying my own mother for multiple years unnecessarily. Number 2 is racing towards the finish line. It's hard not to when you have a breakthrough, when you experience a profound transformation, where you finally heal something, where you finally become aware of some big negative influence that's been, in a sense, unconsciously running your life, and you wake up to it and you say, oh, that's it. And boy, that one unresolved issue from childhood, as an example, it's been influencing my relationships, my career, my happiness, my health. My entire life has been built from this unconsciousness that I have now discovered and experienced the catharsis, a release with, and I feel free, I feel unburdened. I feel so hopeful of my future. Things are gonna be different now. Let's do it again. When's the next ayahuasca ceremony? When's the next breathwork ceremony? what's the next course I can buy? Maybe I'll meditate for 2 hours a day and really try to go deep. And it's like we can get into this pattern of chasing the breakthrough, chasing the satori or the mystical experience. And it's tempting. It's like a drug. It's so real. It's so pure. It's so blissful at times. So just profound for a human to experience. But what ends up happening is we stop integrating. We end up just having these breakthroughs. And then without really allowing like the dust to settle and our behaviors to change, our thinking to change, our sense of self to adapt, and from there our life, we get to see the fruits of our work. We don't do any of that. We just chase the next breakthrough, and it's like in one ear and out the other. Another way people can go about this is it can create just a lot of imbalance in a person's life. Like for example, for me, once I realized that I could press the envelope spiritually, and I could, with my intention, sort of breach the veil and experience astral travel or astral projection, lucid dreaming. I could literally perceive my spirit guides visually at times. I could communicate with them through tarot cards and through my mind, and all these like crazy things I realized I could do. I went on kind of a tangent, and I realized I could probably do this better if I perhaps decalcified my pineal gland. And that led to like 15 different supplements I would take. Shilajit, freaking chlorella, all these different things. Wheatgrass shots left and right, $3 wheatgrass shots, and all these different things. And I decided to alter my diet. I stopped eating meat, and then eggs, and then dairy, and then cooked food. And then I was on like this raw juice diet for a while. I was withering away, but I was freaking cracked open, man. I was sun gazing like a fiend. I was in my own dimension. I was in my own little reality. And it made me very, very open spiritually, but unbalanced, big time as a human being. My wife was probably sitting on the sidelines hoping to God I reeled myself in at some point, watching me lose weight, watching me have nothing to talk about except wildly sort of irrelevant, esoteric concepts that have no real connection to the important things going on in our life. And I was not present for my daughter. I had no friends. I wasn't working. I didn't care about working. I was very sensitive and consequently quite irritable. And I even became quite judgmental of all the 3D people. My intention was to reach enlightenment and to see what I could do with my mind and my spiritual gifts, you could say. But the result was I was a hot mess, man. And again, I was just going too fast. I was also getting to this point where I felt lonely. I felt like no one gets me. Why am I even here? I really wish I could go back to the stars, right? Where I came from, is what I thought. And what I realized is I was isolating myself with the choices I was making. I wasn't progressing spiritually. If anything, I was learning a lesson of not to go too fast, to be more patient, to understand that I chose to come to earth. And I didn't choose to come here to suffer as some kind of martyr and to feel bad. I came here to do some work. And turns out that work is very enjoyable. Raising a family, being a father, being a husband, finding my soul family friends, putting out these YouTube videos. I'm happy to be a regular old human now. But anyway, these are just my personal examples. Maybe you can leave in the comments below. How have you gone a little bit too quickly? Have you gone too quickly? Do you relate with any of this? I'd be curious to know. These are just scenarios I'm spitting out at you from my own experience here. Another trap is avoiding anything that's not pure, that's not high vibe. I took the purest lifestyle to the absolute extreme. And I mentioned my diet already, so I won't go back into that, but that was one of the things. I became a raw vegan and like a really clean, organic-y, picky raw vegan, we'll say. And also, I was avoiding all the stuff I used to enjoy, like rock and roll music. I still like a lot of TV shows on HBO, like The Sopranos and Game of Thrones, and things like that. And anyway, I became just, again, really sensitive, really judgmental, really picky, really unbalanced, really irritable. And I became where I had a very difficult time functioning in my life. Even going to the grocery store proved to be very taxing to me. And it became I would have to come home and I would have to take a nap. And now I have found in working with a lot of people that this type of experience seems like it happens to a lot of people, where all of a sudden it's like things aren't vibrating with you, they're not resonating. So you just start sort of eliminating them from your life, one thing after the other. And that, I think, at least for me, I speculate that it had a temporary but necessary cleansing effect of my frequency. But as life always flows and ebbs and changes, I came to a point where I found myself craving and being like naturally attracted to all those things I once ruled off as low vibration, like the music and the TV shows and the heavier foods. And I found myself in this incredible inner conflict when I felt like all of a sudden that life has shifted gears and I want to go back and watch, True Blood and listen to Guns N' Roses and eat a steak or things like that. But I was like, no, I'm a raw vegan. Those are low vibe. I don't do that. And I kind of held myself at a stasis for quite a long time to my own detriment. And so did my wife. Even with the diet, my wife, we got to this point where we wanted to have another child. And she had I think 2 or 3 miscarriages. She couldn't even hold a pregnancy. We were living too pure of a lifestyle, I would say. And for a time it was perfect. We were literally synchronistically led to this purest way of living. But just as we were led into it, we were also led out of it. But we had this whole identity that was formed around the sensitive spiritual beings that we labeled ourselves as. And again, we had problems as a result, and it just halted our spiritual growth. Our growth at one point said, go here. And then when it said, go here, over here, we fought it. And we kind of pinched ourselves off from the natural flow of our life. And number 4, a big one, and also a very attractive one, is to just ignore our mundane, pointless, human, 3D responsibilities. Who wants to pull weeds in their garden or go to a job they don't prefer or go and fill up their gas tank when there's a mass awakening going on? When the aliens, the ETs, are on the verge of gracing us with their benevolent presence and showing us all this innovative technology that's going to reshape the way we experience life from that point forward. Why would I want to bother with these pointless things? That's the mentality of a lot of people. That was the mentality of me. I was certain that we are going to ascend, like basically transform into light bodies on December 21st, 2012. And what I did, and I convinced my wife to get on board too, is once I created that idea that this is going to happen, we thought to ourselves, why would we want to sort of dilly-dally along like we have been when we should be living it up? We should be, pursuing our highest passions, knowing that we have this sort of safety net in the future we're going to ascend. So we sold our home, we took the cash, and we rented a house on the beach of South Florida, and we lived like absolute rock stars for about a year. We went through all the money. I wasn't working, didn't think I needed to work. And then when I woke up on December 22nd, I felt like a complete idiot. Obviously, we were out of money. We had to rent this crappy month-to-month apartment that reeked of cigarette smoke, and I had my daughter at the time, and it was really a dark time for me. I had to like clean up the mess I created, deal with the shame, deal with like almost the embarrassment of acting so foolishly that at the time it seemed so resonant. I don't know. But anyway, that's kind of an extreme case. I'm not suggesting any of you would do that, but I have learned that we still live in the world, and there are things required to function. For most of us, money. a shelter over our head, a vehicle to get around for a lot of us, depending on where you live, of course. And as unpleasant as those things to maintain can be at times, what I've learned is that the consequences of ignoring it far outweigh sucking it up for a couple of years. And here's what I found happens, my friends. Eventually, my perspective started to shift dramatically. And like even now, I find myself really enjoying and finding happiness in the mundane. Every morning I wake up and my kids are getting up and they're getting ready for school, and I go around and I clean up the house. And I kind of like play around with the kids, and my wife gets the kids ready for school and makes their lunches. Nothing spiritual going on here, nothing crazy, but I love them. I look forward to waking up to my mundane life because I see it now with new eyes. And all the different things I had to kind of go through to influence my perspective shift, you could say, as extreme and challenging as they were, I'm blessed because now I've discovered that there's so much joy to extract from every given moment of our mundane life, even cutting the lawn, even the thing, going to a job, whatever it is. There's happiness to be had if we can open up our mind a little bit. Number 5, perhaps the biggest spiritual trap is the fear of our own power. The resistance of our own power. What I mean by that, and I bet a lot of you can relate, be very curious of your comments down below if you want to share. In the beginning of my awakening, and what I've gathered from working with thousands of you out there over the last several years, is that in the beginning of our awakening, a lot of us are very much led. We are very much guided. And there's this sort of naive, I don't want to say naive, but there's just this, I guess, this experience of where everything kind of just flows and happens very synchronistically. And the next right move is always obvious. There's a resonance, there are synchronicities to confirm it, and we do it, and it works out, and then something else comes up, and we kind of go along our path in this guided way for quite some time. But there comes a point where that guidance system seems to be on the fritz. Where's all the synchronicity? I used to see 1111 constantly on license plates, on the clock, on serial numbers, whatever. I feel like abandoned by my synchronicity. And for the first time in my life, I don't really know what to do. I don't know what to do. So I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna wait because I've learned that it's best to be guided. It's best to wait until you really know. But I would find there would be months and then even years would go by, and I still felt like not only is the next thing not presented itself, but my life is starting to kind of fall apart. I'm finding myself kind of strapped for cash, finding myself just unhealthy, unhappy, like almost like my spiritual awakening kind of came and went and abandoned me back in my life, and this whole new way of going through life is gone. And at that point, I became very upset because I had already invested so much time and energy into this awakening path. I thought there'd be a lot more to show for it. At the very least, continued guidance, continued assistance from the divine. None of it. And I thought, why would this happen? Why would my higher self screw me over like this? And I realized it had just come time for me to step into my power and change the way I think about life. Essentially going from, what should I do next? Or how many of you have asked, what am I supposed to do next? I don't know what I'm supposed to do, Victor, I hear all the time. And if you're asking that, and you've been asking that a while, it's time to ask a different question. It's time to start asking, what do I want to do? What would I like to do? What would I enjoy doing? What sounds fun? What sounds exciting? Let's give it a try. There comes a point where there's this shift that needs to happen, where you take the reins of your own life. And as a conscious sovereign being, you start to embrace that co-creative aspect of you. It's a co-creation. We can work with the divine, but we are the divine as well. And sometimes the next step involves our own opinion on the matter. And I found that I had to kind of learn to go through life in a bit of a different way, where things didn't always manifest so effortlessly and magically. Sometimes I really had to work for it. Sometimes I'd try something and it wouldn't work, and it would be disappointing, and I'd have to try it again in a different way, and then it still wouldn't work. And I'd have to repeat that cycle like 25 times to the point where I almost gave up, but I kept at it, and then it finally worked. And I learned so much from my mistakes. I learned so much about myself. I learned so much about what it means to be a successful human. In the process, I built confidence. I built many positive qualities from sort of going through life not so guided, where things aren't so easy. It was this new way of going through life that made me increasingly aware of just how powerful I am. That if there's something I really, really want, I can make it happen. And so can you. And now it's at the point where I really question, because I know I can get shit done. I know I can make things happen. Now I need to make sure, is this what I really want? But anyway, there comes this point where it's time for you to really step into your power, to own your power. And it can be scary. I was the same way where I was like, I didn't really know what was being asked of me for a while. I just sort of, as I kind of mentioned, I just sort of sat around waiting for the guidance to come back, the next task to do, to present itself, and it never did. And I realized I could have been taking action a lot longer, a lot sooner rather. And that's, if you haven't noticed, what a lot of my videos, my intention is to inspire that in a lot of people. Because I believe, and I've witnessed that my audience, you guys, you all have grown kind of with me. I'm not like this person on the mountain yelling down of what to do. It's like we're kind of in this, in a sense, together. And as I go through things, I share them. And I notice with a lot of you I think are doing what I was doing before, kind of waiting around for the next thing to present itself, when you are fully capable of creating an amazing life for yourself starting this moment, starting today. And there's nothing stopping you. You don't need as much guidance as you may have thought. I realize that. I don't need my higher self to like confirm every little thing. I don't need so much certainty in my life, because if I fall, I learn. And when I learn, I succeed. And it's all part of this positive forward moving process that I can initiate anytime I want. And so can you, my friends.